Welcome back to my channel. This is the continuation of a series, Python Programming for Beginners. This is lesson 5. If you haven't seen the other lessons, I do recommend you go back because they build on each other and I don't want you to get lost. This particular episode is strings. We're going to talk all about strings. They're riveting, they're gripping, you're going to love them. My name's Brian Cafferty. I'm a data and AI enabler. Let's jump in. Let's get right through this because I know you got things to do. We're going to talk about understanding strings, manipulating strings, and formatting output, which is a little bit of a extraneous topic that's really important to cover, and then we'll just wrap things up. So I want to start by going back to a little bit of review because we're talking about different types of variables, and strings are one type. We can see in this example of Python code, we have first name and last name, and you'll notice that they're enclosed in quotes. Python supports either single quotes or double quotes to identify a string. Whatever you use though at the beginning must be matched on the end, so you can't say a single and then a double to close it out. However, this ability to use either is good because if you need to embed, say, a single quote in your string, you can use double quotes around it and it will let you do that. So that's one of the reasons I think it supports that. So we have a string there, first name and last name with my name. We have then after that an age, and notice no quotes around it, age 30. Since it's a whole number, Python automatically creates that as an integer. We don't tell it, Python does this. We have weight, which has a decimal value, right? So that becomes a float in Python, which means floating decimal point. And then we have this variable is_minor, and we set it to false, and that's a Boolean value. So those are the four simple types that we can work with in Python. And we have a bunch of print statements below that. That's basically, I just wanted to cover that, but what we're going to be talking here is about strings. So let's take a look at what a string is. In my last video, I talked all about how all things in Python are objects. And this is really beneficial because that means that objects, and that means a string also, of course, is therefore an object, have methods and properties, and these are attached to the objects, which makes it a lot easier to find and use them. All right, so here we have name equal Brian, and the way this would be conceptually represented, if you could picture a little square in memory in the computer that's holding that letter or character, it would look something like this visually. But what I would recommend is if you think of the game Scrabble, that's a great way to think of strings because you lay them out on the board. Each letter can be handled individually, but it also can be put together to create a word, right? So in Python, it maintains really both. It understands that these letters or these characters go together in a string. And I try to use the word character because it can be numbers, it can be other things other than just letters. But we can see here the name Brian. It also knows that these are a sequence of letters and it keeps track of the order. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. A key thing about this is the counting starts at 0 and not 1 because in a computer, if there's nothing there, no switches are flipped on, that's how it represents things in memory like little charges, then that's also a valid value, right, at 0. So it starts at 0, and this is in other languages can be called base, so they'll say base 0, meaning that's where the counting begins. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So we see here that we have 5 letters, they go 0 to 4. The number, the actual number within this, and this set of letters or characters can be thought of as an array. An array is basically like a collection, like a stack of cards would be an array, right? That's a stack of cards. This is called a single dimensional array because it's only got one dimension. And we'll see more on that. If you're a little confused on that, that's okay. But if you think of just a series of something that is a single thing, like numbers 1, 2, 3, and they're all separate numbers, that's an array. So we have here an array of characters, and we can see it's Brian 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's how the indexes are. So also the index is what the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 represents. That can also be called a subscript. Python doesn't tend to use that word, but in other languages I've used, they're often called subscripts. So we see each character is separately accessible via the index. We're going to see this more closely in a demo. Riveting, hold on. The index starts at 0, as I've mentioned, and the string is an array of characters. That's really all there is to it, but you have to keep that in your head when you work with strings. And all characters are stored as text. There's a way that programs represent strings in memory. And actually, interestingly enough, regardless of the programming language, it's going to represent it pretty much the same way. There's different ways it can do this, but for the most part, different programming languages support the same ways in memory. So that's generally not different with strings. Okay, so I'm going to the folder where I have the slides at this point and the demo program. Something Windows I've probably done before, but it's kind of cool. I saw somebody else do this in a video. Is if you go to a folder in the File Explorer and you just type in CMD, it will open up a command window right there, which is handy because now I don't have to navigate there, right? What I want to do is I want to run the Python IDE called idle. I think I've used this in other videos. And idle is just a little way to edit and run programs in Python. It's a very simple editor. More as we get further into the videos, I may switch us into something a little bit more robust. But idle is given to you automatically as part of Python. So let's stick with it. And it works pretty well. It's not advanced, but for what we're doing, it's really good. So we're just going to say idle, named after one of the characters in Monty Python, Eric Idle. A little trivia at a cocktail party for you. Now what I want to do here is say open, and you can find this demo. I'm going to put the link to this from GitHub where to get the slides and the code. It's called string underscore demo.py. So let me walk through this. I'm going to go to full screen mode and big text characters because my eyes ain't what they used to be. Maybe yours aren't too. First thing I want to highlight is notice at the top we have these three little quotes. Again, remember I mentioned strings can be the double quotes or single quotes. We're going to use single quotes here, but double quotes would work just as well. If we put 3 single quotes or double quotes, and then any number of lines or whatever we want, and as long as we close it again with double or single quotes, always 3, that's called a multi-line comment. In any other language, you just call that a multi-line comment. Python calls them a docstring. And really, it is just a string that it just kind of ignores. So you're creating a string, you're not assigning it to a variable, and Python ignores it. This is used to do any kind of documentation in the program where you need to type in multiple lines, and you don't want Python to think it's actual program code, so it will just be ignored. So I'm just kind of putting a little comment in here about what this program does. The next line, I'm saying I'm creating a variable, name, and I'm assigning it a value, Luke Skywalker. Okay, I'm putting the underscore in there for a reason. I want to kind of mark off a way that we can count where it's at. Normally you would have a space, but we'll look at that a little closer. Then I'm going to print this. This is really to allow us to sort of see the count of the string. Now notice I blocked off code that is in a docstring. This is a common trick, if you will, for programmers use all the time. You've got some code, maybe something's giving you a bug and you want to look at other things, but you can't get around this problem. Maybe you have code that you want to try something different and see if it works, but you don't really want to delete that code because you don't know if you could rewrite it if you had to. Programmers do this all the time. It's called commenting out code, right? Not very difficult. Good thing to know though, because you may be, for instance, trying to get a program working and you've got something you think is close, but you can't do anything else. And so you might feel like, well, I got to delete it or I got to cut and paste it somewhere else. You can just put doc strings around it. Or as you'll see, you can also just put a single pound character before a line, and that will comment out a single line. But it's a way to leave things in that you may want to go back to. A really bad practice, actually, programmers sometimes do is they're afraid that they've made a change and maybe 50 lines of code that used to work, but there was some technical reason they needed to make a change. Maybe the business said, make this small change. And sometimes programmers will leave all that code there, comment it out, and then replace with new code. And I have worked on programs that have lots of commented code out, which is really difficult to maintain. So it's a bad practice to leave code in, just comment it out. It's okay in your sort of testing stage and getting a few things done, but don't leave code in that goes to production. If it's not going to be used, delete it. Source code control, like GitHub and stuff, can always be used to pull it back. Back to our story. So what we're going to do here is now print this. To run this program, and we've got these menus here at idle. So when we're in idle, we're actually in a script editor. And one of the things we can do is run the module here. So let's do that. So we're running it, and now we're popped into the Python command line, which submits your program. So it automatically ran our program. This is the output. I just put a counter here because I wanted to show the string Luke Skywalker. And yeah, I know there's an uppercase L. That's for a reason. The reason I did that actually was so that the L, because the font is smaller when you get to the L, it didn't line up with the numbers. So I used a capital L. So the letters here just kind of line up to the numbers. And we can see the L is happening at index. This is representative of the index. I put that there as kind of a guide. This is index 0, 1, 2, etc. The L is actually starting at 10, so I can't fit a 1 there, so it's just, remember, this starts over again. We go 10 and keep continuing. So we've got 0 through 9, and then I'll start over again. So that's just to show us that's what the string looks like, okay? Now what I'm going to do is uncomment this out, just these few lines, and I'm going to put it back in here so I can focus on, notice it automatically goes all green because it's commented out. Now I'll save this and then I'm going to run this again. So we're going to get what we got before, but I'm also going to print a few other things. I want to show you what happens if we want to access an individual element in the string. This is how we can, this command right here, this is showing us what we typed with a print. This is going to actually take the first character, which is at position 0, and display it. Then we're going to run below that one that says take positions 6 through 8. But remember, we're at base 0, which means we're actually starting at 0, so this is really 7 through 9. There's a really strange behavior, I find, at least in Python. And it's kind of a common pattern, which is you would think typically in other languages, if you say give me the range 6 to 8, it would actually give you 3 characters, 6, 7, and 8. But Python excludes the last one. It does not include the last character. And you'll see this in other places. So just be aware that's what it does. So if I wanted 6, 7, and 8, I would have to say 6:9. So this is saying starting at position 6 and continuing through position 8, but really 6 and 7, and don't show me 8. All right. Now this is an interesting way to do it, in which we give it the, this is really the string we're referring to, and instead of giving it the position, we say -1. It's a very strange syntax. Haven't seen this in too many other places. It's not something I've seen, for instance, I don't think C# supports this, but maybe. However, what it's doing is it's saying go to the end of the string and go back 1 character. So it's kind of a cool technique in which you can access the end of strings and things like that. So we're going to take a look at this. So let's run this. And what we can see is, again, I wanted to show you this part so you get an idea where things are. And when we said I want name 0, we're getting Luke Skywalker, right, the L. When I said 6 to 8, notice we only get the KY. That's over here. And when we said -1, we got this R here. Pretty cool, right? All right. If you're half as excited as I am, I'm twice as excited as you. Not sure where that came from. All right. What I want to do now is I'm going to comment this out just so we don't have too much going on here. Pull this out and save it again. Let me review what we're going to be doing here. One of the things I talked about in my last video, hope you watched it, is that objects have methods. And here our name variable is an object, and one of the methods it has is a very handy one. We're going to see this later, so remember, called count. And what count does is it says count the occurrences of whatever string we pass in here within the object. So how many times does the letter K in this circumstance occur within the name? Another thing we're going to do is, very often with strings, you want to know how long is the string. Maybe you want to loop over the string to do something. Hint, hint, we'll probably be doing that later. So we're going to use the len function. Now this is interesting. This is not a method. This is a basic function which can take anything that can give a length to it. So it can take a string in. So the len function takes a string as a parameter and will give us the length back. So this is different from a method, which you can see is separated by a period. The next thing we're going to do is, there's a nice feature in strings in that we can say, is this sequence of characters in name? So we want to say, is some subset of letters within this string? Is Brian in this list? Is, in this case, SKY, is that in name? So that's, and I'm putting comments next to things. This is how you can do what's called inline comments, which allows me to put comments on the line so you can kind of document what you're doing. good practice to put comments in code to explain what you're doing. They're actually more useful to you. A lot of people think, I'm not going to do that for other people. I find them useful for me because I go back. I don't remember anymore. What was I doing that year? I can't remember. By going back and see my comments, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a good idea I had. Forgot I did that. So what you can do here is put comments in. And here we're going to say is Sky, capital S-K-Y, in the name. Now we're going to ask the same question, right? We're going to say is lowercase Sky in the name. My point of doing this is that Python is case sensitive, and most of the time in programming on Windows, most programs in fact in Windows are not case sensitive. Typically if you use SQL Server, the collation in SQL Server is set so that when you compare lowercase and uppercase, it treats them the same and will come out to being equal. Not so in Python, so I wanted to show you that. So let's run this now, and remember I commented out some of the stuff above so we won't see all of what we saw earlier. And again, I'm showing you the string, and I can say, okay, how many times does the letter K, right, occur? 3 times. We got K, 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 K. All right. And here we're going to say, well, what's the length of this? We can see it's 14. What about, does Sky occur in names? In name? Yes, it does. But lowercase, no, it does not. False. Now, a couple of things also. Realize whenever you do comparisons, you'll also get this Boolean type thing, true or false, back as a result. Here we're actually asking it, does this occur in name? So it comes back with the true or false. Point here is case sensitivity. Also, the kind of cool thing that you can do this sort of format and it will actually search within the string. But now all that stuff above, except the printing of a string, is commented out. Now I'm going to talk about something a little different, but wanted to slide it in here somewhere, which is when you want to format output, format strings. Python's really got several ways to this, and it's really powerful this way because some languages it's really a pain to do. Not so in Python. The first way we're going to do is we're going to create a new string so that we can kind of see the use of 2 strings. I'm not going to bring in numbers and things yet. We'll see that later. But I'm going to create a variable called title, and I'm going to call it, and I'm going to put in a string in there, Jedi Master. Now what I want to do is print my name is, and the idea is to have it substitute the name in where it says my name is. I'll show you can do this with multiple things, but what's going to happen is then I tack on a method. Now how does this work? This is a string, and then all strings have methods. So even though we haven't put in a variable, we can attach this format method. And we're going to do that, and then we're going to say put the name in, and it will automatically substitute where it sees these braces. I forget what you call those, braces. So anyway, it's going to do those characters. Then we're going to do is we'll do another version of this, but the question is, well, what if you have more than one thing you need to substitute? So here we got to give it a number, and there are other ways to do this. So if somebody pipes in, there are other ways. Yes, there are. I'm just giving you some basic ideas of what could be done. But here we can use the number 0 and number 1 that tells it what order to substitute the parameters of the format function, which is the name of the variable. So here it's going to say the name will go into parameter 0 and title will be substituted in with 1. What we can also do, and I just wanted to show, is when we're passing parameters like to a function and things like this, we can actually also append methods to an object. So in other words, we can do things to it as we're passing it in. We don't have to always do it separately. So the title method will convert Luke Skywalker, the name there, to be uppercase first letter, lowercase next letters for each word, so it will look more natural. Now, one of the things you may have noticed is there's this weird underscore between the words, which I really put in there so it would align, but it don't look so good. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the method replace. I'm going to say replace the underscore with a space. And then we're going to print it again, and we're going to say print us now the fixed name. Let's take a look at how this all goes. And it looks like we don't need this anymore at the bottom. Okay, so we're going to say, okay, run. And we see our string again, Luke Skywalker, and I can see my name is, and this is where we did the print with the formatting. So this is where we saw the braces, I think, for the substitution. If empty braces, no number. But then we wanted to substitute 2 things, the name and the title Jedi Master. So this was the braces 1, braces 2. And then again, we wanted to fix this so that it was, remember, mixed case, and we did that using the what was that? I forgot these things too. Oh yeah, the title function. I was trying to remember, what do we call that? All right, so go back here, and with the title function, it kind of fixed that really just fixed the letter that was weirdly set up with the L. Okay. Finally, we did the fixed name, where we replaced that underscore with just a space. I didn't fix the L in this case, so you could go back and you could even method chain by sticking both these things together if you wanted to. I didn't show it here because I want to kind of build up to these things, but there's a lot of cool things we can do. So again, you can go back and take a look at these, but that's what's going on here. So we're going to, in this case, we just did my name as Luke Skywalker. It was substituted here. This was the version where it put in the name and the title, and this is the one where it formatted it to get rid of that uppercase letter that we looked ugly, right? And it did make sense. So the idea of that title function is to make something that would be like, maybe you have something like all upper or all lowercase because you're pulling it in from a file, and you really want to format it. You want to format it like first letter in their first name is capitalized, everything else smaller, and the last name the same type of thing. So it's a very handy thing to have because you might be writing something like a form letter you want to send out or something and merge in stuff. Let's review what we just saw. This is how we started. We're going to look at manipulating strings again. I just want to walk through this again so we drive it home. You can see in this example, the code we just ran, we created a variable, Luke Skywalker, single quotes. And again, we can use double quotes. We then did print, and I mixed them two up just so you could see it can be done. So I did print, and this is also a string. We put double quotes around it this time. We say print name, so we print the value name. We saw that in the output. And then we said print name and then the 0 in brackets. So in that case, it will just do the first character. So that's using an index. Next one we did what's called kind of a slice, right? We're taking two characters, 6 to 8, but we really only get 6 and 7 by doing name and then bracket 6:8. By the last one is saying get me the last character. We can do that by saying for the index -1. This part of what we did is we were able to use the name count, kind of looking at over here, name.count k, and we're going to get a count of how many k's there are in name. So that's a way to use a method attached to the object. The line below that uses the length name, gets the length of the string, and the third line down is just doing, really it's searching within the string for a sequence of characters, uppercase S, then lowercase ky. That returned true because the S was capitalized, Skywalker, right, it's his last name. The second example was meant to emphasize that Python is case sensitive, and so searching for a lowercase s, sky, comes back false. Be very careful of that, because if you're not used to that, it can burn you. And finally, we looked at some formatting of output. We added another variable here, Jedi Master, so we could see how we can merge and embed in our output multiple variables. So the first time we only used the first variable, one variable alone. And notice what we're really doing. I want to kind of try to drive this home a bit. My name is, and then we see the braces, is a string. We've enclosed it as a string. Therefore, the dot format is a method of the string. And from that method, we can pass parameters sometimes. Sometimes we have things we can pass in. In this case, we're passing the variable we want to substitute, which is automatically going to replace the braces in our output message. And this can be very rich. It can be, this is a way, for instance, if you did want to write a form letter, you could do all this and then have all this complex substitution take care of this for you as you're reading through data. But that's, obviously more advanced, but I just want to get you thinking about things you might do with this. The next one, I got two different variables. Could be any number of variables, and I want to be able to substitute those in. In some languages, you start to try to do things to stick them together. It's kind of not fun. But this is nice. I can say my name is, and then braces 0, and I am braces 1, and you can see that in the same order, we're going to be formatting name under 0 and title under 1. Now, it is possible, I saw an example where they flip the numbers around and it substitutes them in a weird way. You can do that. Like wherever it sees 0, it's going to place the first parameter in. But it's good to try to make it as readable as possible. Finally, we're going to say my name is, and this is going to just use the name, but we're going to attach a method to the string title So we're actually doing a conversion of the name itself before it's passed into format. Python is really great with this because this allows you to nest functions, and because we can also append methods, method chaining it's called, we can do a lot with a very little bit of code. It's one of my favorite features. Between this and method chaining, you got a lot of power in a low volume of code, which is really great. Finally, below we see the last two lines, correct name equal. What we're doing is creating a new variable, and we're going to say name.replace, and we're going to replace the underscore with the space, right? That's what those parameters are doing. And now correct name has the same thing, Luke Skywalker, but it got rid of the uppercase letter that was in the middle of his name. If we had something with, multiple words with a space between them, the title would fix the if we had spaces between them and we were to apply the title, each word would become capitalized. And we print out now fixed name, correct name. So all we've really done in there is in that particular thing where we're doing the replace is replace that underscore with the space. But again, we can do many things here. All right, so that's the basics of what we covered. Very short presentation this time. I'm going to build on this, so we're going to look at more things, but I want to get your mind working on how all this fits together. We looked at understanding strings, and we understand now that a string is just a sequence of characters held in memory by Python. We also learned that Python keeps track of each character individually as well as the set. So that's useful to know. And we learned that we can pull out different pieces. We can manipulate those strings by slicing, as they call it. You can actually pull out sections of a string and do things you want to do, which is really important because very often in programming you may have this big string and you want to find out if something is in that string and do things with it and manipulate it. String manipulation is a very important area, especially if you're in a data and analytics space. We also looked at formatting output, and I showed you a few different ways you can do this. There's quite a few different ways, and there are some fairly new ways that have been added to Python 3. So I stayed away from those, and you may want to be a little bit careful if you use the latest, greatest options in Python, only because if you want to give it to someone else and they don't have that version, then they can run into problems running your programs. But don't worry too much about that. Learn, have fun, that type of thing. You're not at a point where you're distributing your code probably. That's really about it. So I know this was short, trying to make them shorter because I know it can be very involved following these things. I hope you found this useful. Please add comments. Are you learning? Is it great? This is a bit different for me because I'm going to the very bare bones basic and trying to walk through and teach people how to program in general as well as how to program specifically in Python. It's a little bit different for me because I usually kind of start with people already at some level, but I'm really happy to do this. It helps to know if it's helping. So thank you. Please share, subscribe, and tune in for the next video. We're going to take this even further.